Recording button, and we are now recording. All right, so let's start again. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch Bites webinar series, which is held at noon Central Time on the second Tuesday of every month. Each webinar in our series will feature a 20-minute presentation followed by a short question and answer session. Feel free to ask questions as you think of them during today's presentation by typing them into the question window on your webinar control panel down at the bottom. As I mentioned, I am Helen Dombalis, the Policy and Strategic Partnerships Director for the National Farm to School Network. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I'm delighted to have such a wonderful attendance list for today and a wonderful list of registrants. So as you all just experienced with some technology issues, we do record all of our webinars. They are archived on our website, farmtoschool.org, which is where you will also find additional resources related to Farm to School, including links to our Farm to School contacts in all 50 states. And that's the slide that you're looking at now. This is from our website, and this allows you to contact the state lead for your state. If you're new to Farm to School, or if you have questions about food safety issues or local policy or any other general questions, please contact that state lead after today's webinar. And while you're on our website, I just want to point out that you can join our network and sign up for our email newsletters, which will let you know about future webinars. On that note, I just want to let you all know that our next webinar will be on December 10th. It will be called Farm to School and After School Programs, and you can already sign up online for that webinar by going to farmtoschool.org. So to get us started, today's webinar is called Farm to Food Bank to School, an emerging model in communities across the country. And I will just briefly mention before we turn it over to our panelists that today's webinar really emerged out of a recent conference that was held in Tucson, Arizona, excuse me. It was convened by the food bank there, as well as Feeding America, which organizes over 200 food banks around the country. I had the pleasure of attending this conference, and while there, got to meet the three panelists that you'll hear from today, and really got great exposure to the fact that there are food banks really looking at how they work with and serve communities, realizing, as you'll hear from them, that they want to go beyond just emergency feeding and really partner with farmers and schools and parents and youth to really build local economies, and in particular to connect with schools. So I'm very appreciative for the panelists that we have today sharing those experiences, both with me in September and now on today's webinar. So quickly, I want to introduce today's panelists. Phoebe Kitson is the program manager for the Chester County Food Bank in Exton, Pennsylvania. She is a founding member of the now 5-year-old organization that focuses on fresh foods, farm initiatives, nutrition education, and the distribution of government and non-government food to over 90 agencies in her county. Jeanette Batiste is the Chief Operating Officer for FoodLink, which is the regional food bank serving Genesee River Valley and the Finger Lake region, both in New York. And within this capacity, she oversees FoodLink's day-to-day operations, including the distribution of 16.7 million pounds of food a year to a network of 450 community partner organizations across 10 counties, and the production of and distribution of 3,500 meals a day for at-risk children across the city of Rochester. And then our third speaker will be Katherine Strickland, who is the Executive Director of the Food Bank of North Alabama. Prior to assuming her role, she was the Food Bank's first Director of Community Food Security, facilitating collaborative local food initiatives within North Alabama's regional foods shed. So with that, I am now going to turn it over to our first speaker, Phoebe, and thank you all again for joining. Phoebe? Phoebe, if you are muted, just be sure to unmute yourself. All right, I am not sure. Maybe Phoebe is having some technology issues. I think what we will do then, since we can't get a hold of Phoebe, is I'm just going to advance the slides forward. Jeanette, if you don't mind, I'm just going to.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
hey, Phoebe.
Can,
Yes, we can hear you.
can you hear me on the phone?
Yes,
Can
we
you
can
hear
hear
me?
you.
Great. Clear. Hello. This is Phoebe Kitson. I'm calling in from Pennsylvania. It's my pleasure to be with you. I apologize for the technical difficulties. For the food bank here in Chester County, we're very fortunate. We have a couple of things going for us. That is wonderful, good farmland and good water, and 4 seasons. So one of the great opportunities we had as a food bank was to assess the needs in our community and then start right off from the very beginning, focusing on non-perishable foods that we provide through government and non-government, as I mentioned, but also to really work with our farmers. It was one of our initial projects to do so, and in fact, a local farmer is the vice president of our board of directors. So he has been a leader in our assessment as a food hub for our area. A couple of things that we do uniquely is we work with the county park system. So we have a county park in our area where we actually created an outdoor classroom experience for students and for teachers to come out and learn about farming, to learn about growing, particularly in something like a raised bed, which is more conducive to the students in their schools, and also to get some nutrition education. So you'll see some slides coming up of students out at this farm. It's called Springton Manor. And in some of them, they're learning to build beds, and others they're learning to plant and grow. And then they take these lessons that they have learned back to their classroom. So in addition to the outdoor classroom that we created in conjunction with the parks, we also then have a large raised bed garden program with a focus on helping students grow food at school, and then with working in their cafeterias and in their classroom, the hope that they will be able to use the food they grow either at lunch, if the school runs its own private food service, or in the classroom through FCS programs like what used to be Home Ec. And we have found just wonderful partners through the school of both teachers and guidance counselors, biologists and science teachers interested in creating curriculum that they can use. So the food bank 4 years ago started as a resource for them to find classroom science-based curriculum beginning in pre-kindergarten and going all the way to the 8th grade. So I think those are some of the projects that we have really tried to develop with strong relationships with the farmer, strong relationships with the community and the farms in our area, and a strong relationship with schools. One of the other opportunities we have is to actually be on 5 farms where the farmer has set aside land for the food bank to grow food. There we are able to use volunteers and school groups who come out and kind of get the big picture of how food is grown. So the slide you're looking at is a group of teenagers from one of those schools that came out and helped us harvest food on the farm. So they really get hands-on experiences. Probably one of our favorites is when the kids say, hey, can I take a bite of this? Or what is this? And we're able to educate them and say, sure. Since there aren't any pesticides or anything put on the plants, they actually can eat the food right there in the garden and get that fresh taste. So we've seen that as a big asset for us in terms of teaching kids how to grow food, teaching families how to eat better, and helping kids, head home with a few ears of corn to say, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, look what I picked. So in our low-income areas, we're able to provide fresh food through these programs and then work with our schools and community partners so that even if a student isn't able to come out and volunteer, we're able to bring the food to them or bring the farm to them through their school programs. What we found is that the schools like to sign up for a half day on the farm or a half day out in the field, and then go back to school and talk about it. So we've enjoyed creating those kinds of opportunities. Probably the final thing I want to talk about is one of our partnerships is with the local CSA. And what we will now be is a pickup site for CSA that's in the southern part of our county. Instead of her members driving, the 45 minutes or so to her, we will be a pickup site for about 75 of the CSA sites, CSA members. And we're excited to be able to offer that opportunity to folks. On a final note, what you're looking at again is this farm where we work on a county park, and the students come out. You can see they're actually doing a scavenger hunt. So we've created opportunities for them to learn and to get that hands-on experience. And I think to show our commitment, one of the big pieces is we brought in a farmer. Of all the latest hire we have is a gentleman who's been farming for a long time and a great experience, who's looking forward to growing as much fresh food as possible for us. So he's the one who created the opportunity for these high tunnels that you see in the slides, and loves working with the students when they come. In the slide, you can see hydroponics on the bottom right-hand corner. You see the raised beds. And for us, with the climate that we have, we probably will grow 10 to 11 months out of this year. And we look forward to be able to, again, bring the schools in and bring our community partners in so that everybody just has a healthier opportunity and understands where their food grows and how it grows and how easy, in many ways, it is to get fresh, healthy food to all members of our community, especially those who we serve through our food cupboards, food agencies, and schools. So I hope that helps.
Great, thanks, Phoebe. And next we have Jeanette.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to also present in this conference. I'm Jeanette Batiste. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at FoodLink. I'm located in Rochester, New York. FoodLink is the food bank that serves the Finger Lakes and Genesee River Valley. We distribute about just under 17 million pounds of food every year. What you see on the slide right here is just our core warehousing and retail damage sorting. And traditionally, like most food banks, we've been primarily a non-perishable, focusing on non-perishable foods, cans. And over the last 2 to 3 years, we have changed our strategic focus to really incorporate fresh produce. And so this started with just basically looking to move more fresh produce through our network, using the millions and millions of dollars of food-related assets that we have to do more to impact on the local food economy, and also make sure that we got healthy food to our network of agencies. We serve over 450 different human service providers. So we started building relationships with local farmers, and last year we sourced over 3 million pounds of food from farmers in our region. I have lost the ability to click. There we go. Thank you. It's back. So we sourced over 3 million pounds of food from farmers in our region, and then distributed that to throughout our network. And so this was basically the start. Sorry, I'm having trouble with us sourcing more local produce. And upstate New York truly is an amazing place for fresh local food. We have just a network of farms and farmers, and we grow wonderful crops. And so there truly is a lot of fresh, nutritious food available that what we found was actually being tilled back into the soil at the end of the harvest season. It wasn't harvested. And we did some small amount of gleaning, but we found that there truly was so much product available that there was no reason that anybody should go hungry in our 10-county service area. And so we started working with farmers first on of rescuing food, whether it be through gleaning or through the pick and pack prices, getting it off the farms and into our network. And we're fortunate as a food bank. We also have a very large industrial kitchen. And so one of the things that we quickly ran into was the fact that, right at the harvest season, which is just, in upstate New York now, the season's just about coming to a close, there's this abundance of product that if we could just stabilize it, or if we could just, maybe add value and freeze it, that there would be opportunity to use that product throughout the rest of the year. So our industrial kitchen does, over 3,000 meals every day, and we have local ingredients like squash in our meals. So first it was more of a, if we processed it, we could use it throughout the course of the year, and that would help cut our food costs. And then we ended up having a conversation with some of our other community partners, including the Cornell Cooperative Extension and food service directors that said, they also were interested in using fresh local product in their meals. And so Cornell University did a study that said that kids were more likely to eat apples if the apples were sliced. Sounds groundbreaking. There's not much to it, but and that's actually true, that children are more likely to eat the product if it's sliced. And so Wayne County is in our service area, and Wayne County happens to be the second largest apple producing county in the United States. However, the food service directors there were struggling to get Wayne County apples in their meals, because when they would go directly to a farmer to purchase, the farmer would bring a tote of apples right off the field and put them in the parking lot of the school. And the food service director said, we just can't handle the product coming in this way. And they didn't have the bandwidth to wash and slice. So they asked us, and they said, can you use the excess capacity of your kitchen to help us impact here? And we said, we think we could. So our kitchen, we started a second shift. And during that second shift, we would buy from local farmers. The product would come in, and we would use what is largely a workforce development shift to wash, bag, slice. And in this picture here, we're doing peaches, and we also do peaches. We do other things like squash. We'll wash, peel, and freeze squash. We do a squash puree. We have a number of different things. We did a number of local salads over the summer to Rochester City School District. And we're uniquely positioned because we have the assets that are required to do this. We already have an existing truck fleet. We have existing freezer cooler space. We're mission driven, and this is what we're committed to. And so it really was a win-win for us. Last year we were in 13 different school districts. And we're looking forward to expanding that. We're having good conversations right now with other vendors and distributors that might be able to help us carry this into other school districts across our service area and beyond. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thanks, Jeanette. And lastly, I'm going to turn it over to Katherine.
Great. Well, my name is Katherine Strickland. I'm the Executive Director of the Food Bank of North Alabama, and I'm so happy to be here. And we've been asked to highlight one of our projects called the Farm Food Collaborative, which connects local farmers to school cafeterias and local grocery stores, distributors, restaurants, hospitals, as well as workplace cafeterias. But before I dive into the details of the program, we first just wanted to explain why support for local farmers has become a key focus for our food bank. And that all begins with a story about a can of peas. So several years ago, our food bank was in the market to purchase a truckload of peas, and being good stewards of charitable dollars, we purchased them at the very best price available. And when they arrived at our warehouse, we realized that they had been grown, processed, and shipped from China. Whoops. Now, this was a huge wake-up call for us. I'm trying to go back. Oops. Helen, maybe you can help?
Yep, I'll go back while you keep talking.
Okay. Thank you. So, so these peas from China was just very startling to us because they had come from obviously 11,000 miles away. But we soon realized that this is not at all uncommon, that in fact 2/3 of all fruits and vegetables now consumed in the U.S. are coming from outside of the region. And so what does this mean for our food bank here in North Alabama? Well, for us, it means that the 7 million pounds of food that we distributed last year on behalf of residents at risk of hunger, the vast, vast majority of this food came from outside of our region. And this was not always the case. When our food bank first began in the 80s, we were able to supplement food that we brought in from outside of the region with donations from local farmers. But then in the early 90s, we began to see the effects of the national Get Big or Get Out farm policy. And many of the farmers that we had relationships with, some of them sold off their land, others quit vegetable production altogether, and still others went into bankruptcy. And in fact, Ed, who runs our warehouse at our food bank, he lost a farm that had been in his family for over 100 years. So at our food bank, we are keenly aware of the cost of this inexpensive food, both in terms of livelihoods and ways of life. And we see it as a contributing factor as to why our food bank and our 230 partner feeding programs went from serving an estimated 86,000 individuals a year to now over 100,000. And so to better understand the cost of this inexpensive food, we, 2 years ago, commissioned a study from Ken Meter, one of the foremost food system analysts in the U.S., and we asked him to assess the health of our local food and farming economy. And the results were both sobering and promising. So Ken found that 54% of farmers in North Alabama, so more than half, were reporting net losses in the last census of agriculture. And of the ones reporting gains, if we adjust those gains for inflation, they're actually earning less than they did in 1969. So if you look at that red line on the screen, that shows basically their balance between income and expenses. Now, if we contrast this with what consumers in our region, and these are consumers that are reporting some of the highest rates of diet-related diseases in the country, we are spending $2.4 billion a year on food. It's just of that, we're spending $2.2 billion on food that's coming from outside of the region. So that's why all the local food initiatives at our food bank are focused on capturing these food dollars that are leaving our local economy, retaining this wealth in our region, and at the same time promoting some of the and creating greater access to some of the healthiest food choices we have available to us. So this brings us to the Farm Food Collaborative Project, which is where our food bank is facilitating a working group of local farmers, local buyers, as well as support agencies like our Alabama Department of Agriculture and Industries. And our aim is, by working together, to support the ability of local farmers to sell local foods to local buyers, whether that's schools or hospitals, workplace cafeterias, even grocery stores. And really the heart and soul of this project is really that the fact that farmers are no longer anonymous, replaceable suppliers, that they are not only known to the buyers, but are promoted. And the farmers are key decision makers in how this project is run. So we have been operating for basically our very first growing seasons for 12 months, and we successfully facilitated over $160,000 worth of local food sales on behalf of 6 local farmers and 17 buyers. Now this includes 2 school districts that are serving collectively about 39 individual schools. And despite this initial success, we are encountering challenges. And so I just wanted to highlight a few of those. Of course, price, required food safety certifications, and a key one is the lack of infrastructure, particularly to transport that product to buyers. And I just want to highlight how in our next growing season we plan to address some of these barriers. So in terms of price, we are working with the school nutrition directors and exploring ways that they can make use of the geographic preference option, which is a tool that they can use in their school procurement process that will help level the playing field for our local farmers. Then in terms of required food safety certifications, in the state of Alabama, local schools can purchase product direct from local farmers if that farmer is GAP certified, which stands for Good Agricultural Practices. It's a food safety certification. Unfortunately, in Alabama, there are very few farmers with this certification. So we have partnered with others like the Alabama Cooperative Extension to host free GAP training workshops for farmers, and we plan on hosting our second one this spring. The key barrier that I wanted to highlight is this lack of infrastructure to aggregate, store, and transport that product to local schools. And just to give you an example, 3 years ago, one of the school districts that's a member of the Farm Food Collaborative, they attempted to purchase strawberries from a local farmer. The farmer had the supply, but he declined the sale because he did not have the time or resources to deliver that product to all 27 schools in the district. Now we fast forward with the Farm Food Collaborative project, and last year we were able to successfully facilitate a recurring sale of locally grown sweet potatoes from a farmer named Clark in Coleman County to a local school district. And what made this work is that Clark and his staff brought the sweet potatoes to our food bank. We loaded up half the order on one of our refrigerated trucks. We have two. And his staff delivered to half the schools, and we delivered to the other half before we picked up donations at local grocery stores. So we really see this project as a win-win. It's a win for Clark because he has a sale contributing to the viability of his farm. It's a win for us because we are making best use of our community-owned assets and not running an outbound truck empty from our food bank for picking up donations. And then, of course, school children have fresh local food available to them in the cafeteria. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Catherine, and thanks to all of our speakers. I know that I had met all three of you in Tucson earlier this September, but I just learned even more, and I appreciate you taking the time to offer information about the work you are doing. So we're going to now move to our questions. Whoops. We're now going to move to our questions. So first of all, we got a question about whether or not the slides will be available to download. You can certainly email us if you'd like to get those slides. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this webinar was recorded and will include the slides as well. So you can go on our website later if you'd like to get those. So the first question is from someone wondering what you all are doing to contact local community agencies and local community groups to facilitate improved coordination of services, and what you can do to keep the message fresh and interesting for both the teachers and the kids. So would any three of you like to answer that?
I can answer that from my perspective. This is Jeanette at FoodLink. Primarily, our contacts are, at this point, farm-to-school advocates within the school systems, Cornell Cooperative Extension, and the food service directors. The food service directors, obviously, from school nutrition standpoint, are the gatekeepers to bringing this product into their schools, and we found that political will on behalf of the food service director makes a huge difference. If the food service director doesn't want or doesn't care about buying local farm product, they don't have to. And so really working with them to understand the importance of offering these types of product is an entry point for us. Most recently, just last weekend, we presented and also were exhibitors in the New York State School Nutrition Association Conference, which was a conference of all food service directors across New York State. We were lucky that it was held here in Rochester, so it was easy for us, but it was an incredible networking opportunity. And as a vendor or as an exhibitor in the conference, I was struck at how different we were from all of the other exhibitors that were showcasing items for national school lunch programs, like, just the typical chicken nuggets or pizza or grain bars, similar to like Nutri-Grain bars to fit fruit requirements, etc. Really, and we were offering, squash puree and a cucumber tomato salad that was from New York State product, and then sliced apples. And so we were just completely different. And there were an incredible number of food service directors that were so excited to see options, these kind of options available to them. And so for us, again, just the food service directors are the gateway for us.
We found, this is Phoebe Kitson calling from Exton, Pennsylvania. In addition to what Jeanette said, another group that we have linked with is when the school districts do their continuing education days. So just last week, all the teachers gathered at the intermediate unit for was election day, so they had to do some continuing education. We are now one of the speakers for those events so that the food service people can sign up, or we found the FCS teachers, that's our home ec teacher, can sign up, in addition to some of the science teachers were really keen on what we did. So we created an adult outdoor classroom experience that would sort of run them through the paces of what we do with a third grade group or a kindergarten group. And they loved it. They thought it was just spectacular. And the bonus was to make chili from all the locally grown stuff that we had in the high tunnel out at the farm.
Great. Thanks, Phoebe. Katherine, did you have anything to add here before I go to our next question?
No, I think the answers were wonderful.
Great. Thank you. Phoebe, this is a question for you that came in. Someone said that the challenge they've seen is that much of our growing and harvest season occurs during the summer months when the kids are not in school. So the question is, how are the school gardens cared for during those summer months? And then what happens to the food grown during that period?
We have, within our school system itself, we have close to 150, almost 200 beds that are within our school district. So we know that's a challenge. One of the key components is selecting the right kind of product and produce that hopefully we here would avoid, say, tomatoes, which we know will come in abundance about the second week of August in some situations. So you try to grow a crop that's going to come in the fall. But that's not to say what we also do is try to, it's sort of adopt a garden for the week. So from mid-June to the 1st of September, what we'll do is create like a 10-week sign-up sheet. And the one family adopts the garden for 1 week for the summer, so no one feels the full burden. And what they do is weed, water, and weigh. So that's kind of the key piece, weed, water, and weigh. And you end up needing to go to the school garden perhaps twice, maybe 3 times. And here's sort of the carrot at the end of the stick, if we can say. And then they can give that food to whoever they wish. So if it's a local soup kitchen or a local food cupboard, great. If they need to take it home and make something and give it to a neighbor, fine. If they want to try it themselves, we're all about getting these kids to try new vegetables because they all need to broaden their palates a bit. So we do see some experiences with that, but we try really hard to encourage 3-season growth, and we succeed most of the time when you offer them that opportunity. And again, I think your plant selection makes a big difference.
Great. Thanks, Phoebe. The next question is for Jeanette. For the processed food operation in New York State that you talked about earlier, can you comment on the cost of the foods to the schools? Do they come in at a competitive cost for fresh crop products? And for the squash puree, for instance, can you meet the frozen squash puree a prime vendor might have for a similar product that's not local?
That's a good question. Can you just repeat the last part of the question about the squash puree? I didn't hear you clearly.
Sure. Just a question of whether or not your local fresh squash puree is competitive with the frozen squash puree that might come in that's not local. So I think it's
Sure.
really a
Okay.
question of pricing and competitiveness and how you handle
Yes.
selling to
Yes.
schools.
Absolutely. No, pricing is incredibly important, and that was one of the things that the food service director said to us. They said, "We'll buy it from you, but obviously they're all operating off of fixed reimbursements, and it has to come in competitively, and all of our product does. So that's not an issue, and part of that is because of our ability, like as we learn to source, and I referenced some of the other sourcing that we do, that with the millions of pounds of local farm product that we're already buying for our food bank, gives us competitive pricing because of just the sheer volume that we're sourcing. And so we have good relationships, this many years into it now with apple farmers, and obviously, like I mentioned, this is a very large apple producing part of the country. And we've got great relationships with apple farmers to be able to source at good prices for them, but also good prices for us that meets the price points of the food service directors. And our nonprofit status, we are covering the cost of what it takes us to do this, but there are very small margins in this. We are not a for-profit organization, and that makes it a unique relationship and something that I think food banks are positioned to do, and to do it well with their excess capacity, where a for-profit organization might not go into this, might not find it as lucrative as it wouldn't make it worth their while, if you will. And the same thing with the squash puree. Squash is grown here in upstate New York. We have great we have the best squash and we have outstanding squash here, all different varieties. And so we'll do acorn, we'll do different types of butternut, we'll do other varieties as well. And our squash puree is really wonderful. Some of our food service directors have even come to us and said, instead of the puree, do you mind just peeling and dicing it and freezing it, because I will put it in my ovens and I'll just do a roasted squash. So they said, do you mind just changing it a little bit and not pureeing it, giving it to us cubed? And we're flexible enough where we can do that. We can say, sure, how many pounds can we do for you? And then they'll place their order. So we have some schools that order the puree, some schools that order diced squash and different things as well. So we do, but yes, to your question, yes, our product, it tastes great, and we are within the price points.
Great. Thanks for that. We've gotten actually several questions about that pricing piece, so that was very helpful. Katherine, a couple of questions have come in regarding food safety, which you mentioned earlier. You mentioned the GAP training. So a couple of folks have asked whether or not you're familiar with the Food Safety Modernization Act, given that food safety is a barrier. And questions of A, if you're familiar with that, and B, if you know how the proposed Food Safety Modernization Act might present further barriers.
We are somewhat familiar with the Food Safety Modernization Act and how that may impact local farmers. And so there's another organization in our service area called the Alabama Sustainable Agriculture Network, and they're actually holding letter writing campaigns on that very piece of legislation to ensure that local farmers or small-scale farmers won't be negatively impacted and have cost burdens that prevent them from participating in the marketplace. It does seem that just from an industry point of view, at least our very limited experience in this realm, it does seem that the food industry is headed this way. If you're interested in wholesale sales, this may be just the standard to meet. And so we are strategizing ways to make the information available to farmers and to strategize ways where it can be not so cost prohibitive to, like put a sink on your farm to meet some of the standards. Using plastic sinks as opposed to an investment of several thousands of dollars. So farmers that we're working with are very creative, very inventive, and are finding ways on site on their farm to meet certain certifications, and we just want to share their strategies with others.
Great, thanks, Katherine. And I'll just add here, before we go to our next question, the Food Safety Modernization Act was a piece of legislation passed back in signed into law by President Obama in early 2011. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, is now implementing that law. And so this question that Katherine just spoke to and that several people have asked about is a really important one. FDA is accepting through Friday, so this Friday, November 15th, accepting comments. So Katherine mentioned that in Alabama, for example, there have been letter writing campaigns. The National Farm to School Network is submitting comments to FDA, and we're encouraging everyone, whether you're a farmer or a food service director or a food bank, we're encouraging everyone to submit comments to FDA because there is so much innovation happening right now in local and regional food systems, whether it's through a food bank or through some other type of food hub operation. There's a lot happening that we want to ensure continues to be successful, as Katherine mentioned, wanting to make sure that regulations that are put in place by FDA are really scale appropriate to ensure that those smaller and more sustainable farms and then the food hub operations that are helping connect the farm to the school are really successful. So if you have follow-up questions about that, feel free to email me, helen@farmtoschool.org. I also encourage folks to visit the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition website. We are a member of that coalition, as is the Alabama organization that Katherine mentioned. along with about 100 other organizations. And the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition has amazing resources that are kind of broken down, whether you're a farmer or a consumer. They've got information on how to submit comments or even just simply sign on to a petition if you don't have the time to get your own comments done this week. So with that, I'm going to turn it to our next question. A question came in about whether or not the panelists could talk a little bit about your relationships with the food banks. So just to clarify, all three of our speakers are actually employed by food banks. So they work with and run food banks, which is really, I think, unique. And, I think that question comes in because we haven't had a webinar before feature this amazing partnership between food bank staff and farmers and schools and really their local food systems. So the second piece of the question that came in from that person is if you all could highlight how your programs, if they have, done anything to help food pantry clients.
This is Phoebe Kitson. I can comment on that. The two things we've done. The first is through nutrition education, we send out information about the produce product that is going out every time, because not all of them have ever seen a butternut squash. Or when it comes to the greens, we're still doing greens identification. So if it's pak choi, we send it out and tell them what it is so that the volunteers at the cupboards feel really confident about what they're getting. We certainly communicate all that with email. We encourage them to look it up, Google it, take a picture of it, so that every leaf, whether it's a lettuce leaf or whether it's a squash or an apple or something really obvious, comes with nutrition information so that they won't be afraid of it but actually more willing to try it. We also do programs with both seniors and children where we ask our nutrition educators or ask our interns to create recipes that use ingredients where anything beyond the fresh produce you can buy at the dollar store or the local corner store, since we have some food deserts in our county. That's one. The second thing that was extremely successful last year was we found if this big bin of lettuce or pak choi or bok choy came in and we took it and just did the simple process of putting that head of romaine lettuce into a plastic sleeve like you would get at your local grocery store and then sent it out to the cupboard, the client was more likely to take the lettuce and take it home because it looked like what it looks like in their grocery store. It was incredible. It was stunning how just putting it in a bag that made it look like you see it in a store, the food disappeared faster.
Thanks, Phoebe. And Jeanette or Catherine, do you all want to respond to that question of what the impact you've seen for the clients?
Absolutely, I'd love to speak to that. And again, we first started buying more produce for our food bank because of the effort to improve the quality of food being distributed to individuals in need of emergency food. So we serve 10 counties, about 450 different organizations, and we've been working with our partners to increase the distribution of produce to the clients. Of course, we meet many of the barriers that were just previously discussed about clients not recognizing the food or knowing what to do with it. And we also run a number of nutrition education programs to help get at those root challenges to the consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables. We have, in our process of, and in our effort to distribute more fresh food and move away from processed, high sodium, just unhealthy product, highly processed food, we help our food pantries in the procurement of infrastructure. Doing produce requires coolers often, and many of our pantries have more shelves and not enough cooler space. And so we've helped with administering like mini grants, if you will, to help our pantries buy freezers or coolers so that way they can move more produce and stabilized produce. Frozen produce is second best to fresh. And so that's been ongoing for a handful of years. And then last year, like I said, we did 3 million pounds of produce. This is just the holiday season now, and we're distributing all of our Thanksgiving boxes. We're doing over 20,000, supporting over 20,000 different Thanksgiving baskets. And as an example, we moved away from doing like canned green beans and canned squash, or canned sweet potatoes, canned anything. So our Thanksgiving baskets are a 10-pound bag of local New York State fresh produce with the turkey, or a ham or a chicken. So and this is our second year of doing that, is saying we're not giving out these cans of product anymore. We're going with New York State. This is harvest season up here, and we're going to do local New York State produce. So there's cabbage, there's potatoes, there's apples, there's onions, squash. So this has really been an effort, something that we're focusing on and committed to, because we know that I think food banks have squeezed out every available can that we could possibly get our fingers on. But we know from some projections that in upstate New York, there's probably 100 million pounds of produce that's grown here every year that's tilled back into the soil, that's not eaten. And again, I said this earlier, there's no reason why anyone should go hungry here with the amount of food that's grown. And so for us, capturing that food is the greatest opportunity.
Thanks, Jeanette. Katherine, did you have anything to add?
Sure. With our Farm Food Collaborative project, I only sort of highlighted one dimension of it, which is facilitating wholesale sales to institutions like schools. We're also working with small, potentially limited resource farmers who are really exclusively interested in retail sales, so farmers markets. So we are supporting basically providing technical assistance to neighborhood markets, farmers markets that are emerging throughout our service area. In our first growing season, we were able to support the launch of 5 new farmers markets in our service area. One of them was in a community that the food bank has partnered with for years and years and years. It was actually a neighborhood where we were working with them to launch a worker-owned grocery store, because the community members consider themselves to be a food desert. And while that project unfortunately is postponed or could not go forward yet, it was so exciting to be a part of the launch of this farmers market. And every year we host a Taste of Health fair where local farmers are there, chefs come, and there's cooking demos, there's container gardening demos, and it's a real community celebration. And then sort of unexpectedly within the Farm Food Collaborative project, that the aim was truly to help facilitate sales on behalf of local farmers. Its true intent is really an economic development initiative. However, farmers like Clark that are involved were so appreciative of these efforts, they really wanted to give back. And so they are taking the sweet potatoes, for example, that don't meet the size requirements of certain buyers, and they are donating them to our food bank. And because we're very small, we have a full-time staff of 10, we simply don't have the capacity to bag and sort thousands upon thousands of pounds of local sweet potatoes. So we're partnering with the Society of St. Andrew to help make that happen. And it really brought tears to the eyes of our staff this year, because we brought in almost 180,000 pounds of local produce, from sweet potatoes to broccoli, which for our food bank is significant. And it was the first time that we had local fresh product in our warehouse in almost 20 years.
So I realize that we are coming up on the hour. We typically don't have webinars that last this long, but we actually still have 100 people on the line and still have several more questions. Katherine, Phoebe, and Jeanette, are you all able to stay on a couple more minutes?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Sure.
All right. Well, let's go through some of these quicker questions then, and thanks for folks who are still asking really good questions. Jeanette, you might have already mentioned this, but do you know how many pounds of food you were able to process last year?
Sure, absolutely. Last year, we probably processed just upward of 50,000 pounds, which was fairly, humble beginnings for us. And this year we're well on our way to at least tripling that, which we're pretty excited about. So there's a lot of growth opportunity in it, and we're just overwhelmed by the response from schools and interest in this farm to school initiative. So that's our number.
Great, thanks. Catherine, I think this one would probably be best answered by you. Regarding transportation, do the food banks, or does your food bank use its fleet of trucks to transport food into the community at a charge? Is there any sort of fuel surcharge or transportation fee that is associated with those deliveries?
No, no. The way that the collaborative, now this is the Farm Food Collaborative project is working, the buyers and the farmers, and we help facilitate these sales, they both agree on a price that includes something to give back to the collaborative project. So, however, it's built into the price that the farmer and buyer agree upon. And that precedent was really started with one of the founding farmers who, in the first transaction, just wanted to make a point that this program go live beyond grant support and that it could contribute to its ability to self-sustain itself. But there's the food, we just consider this a community asset to be shared, and so we do everything we can just to facilitate these sales. So there's no delivery charges or surcharges for freight or anything like that.
Great, thank you. Phoebe, a quick one for you. Do you know what percentage of your total produce at your Chester County Food Bank is coming from your own garden beds or farm plots?
I will say I do not. That is information someone can email and ask me. I would say because we also are distributing to, we also purchase from one of the 9 farm auctions that are in Pennsylvania. We're very fortunate 2 of the farm auctions are right here. So I can get broccoli for 24 cents a head at the farm auction. So I do not know that breakdown in terms of from the farms, from the raised beds, and from what we purchase at the auction.
Great, thank you. We'll just take a couple more of these quick questions, and then I encourage you all, you can follow up with us at the National Farm to School Network, and also we'll be sure to send out contact information for the speakers since we're not going to get to all of these questions. Jeanette, you might have said this already, but who does the majority of the food processing that takes place in the industrial kitchen? Is it paid staff or volunteers or agency partners?
Right, that's a great question. So we started the processing on our second shift. So our first shift, which does about 3,000 meals a day, runs from about 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the second shift comes in immediately after and works until around 8 p.m. We have 3 full-time staff people that would be on that shift, and the remainder of the individuals are through our workforce development program, and they're not full-time, they're not paid staff. So they're trained on knife skills and other food service skills, food safety, and it's an opportunity that we lend to our community, and we do our best to hire where possible through our workforce development program, and also refer individuals through other placement agencies to many of the food manufacturing companies in our region. This is a large a very strong food-based economy, so we're fortunate in that regard.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll take one last question, and then apologies to the folks that I am not going to be able to get to. What strategies might you all offer to help build flexibility among school food service managers that might be resistant to switching over to a local procurement model from large suppliers like a Cisco, for example? Any tips there?
I can speak to that. This is Jeanette. First, I'd say that, so Cisco, there's going to be things that the food service directors are going to need that Cisco's going to offer, and so I wouldn't necessarily go in and ask them not to source from Cisco. I think that the transition is gradual, and you're going to make greater inroads when you offer opportunity rather than when you tell them what not to do. So they have to make that choice largely on their own. I think that you need to come in, they're expecting it. Like, if, I was asked the question about price, can we even make price point? They're expecting it to be more expensive. And so price does matter. It's very important for them, particularly if they're reimbursed by a National School Lunch Program. So I think you have to come at it with, discussing price, discussing product quality, and basically just demonstrating how you are, in our case at least, that we're eliminating the burden that they would have assumed had they tried to process this on their own. And they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the staff that they need to take on any additional burden as it relates to processing or prep. And so when we can meet them where they are and hear their challenges, they feel that they're part of the conversation and get excited about looking for the solutions. But I think that that they all have their own real limitations, and it's very important for us to validate those limitations and bring them to the table as we look for solutions. So for us, even with this, the story of the sliced apples, they sat around the table and we did this in collaboration with them.
Those partnerships are certainly key. Thanks, Jeanette. All right, with that, I am going to end the webinar. Thank you all so much for joining today. Again, apologies to the folks whose questions I did not have a chance to get to. We will be sure to follow up and make sure you have contact information for the 3 presenters today, Phoebe, Jeanette, and Katherine. This was very informative. I certainly learned a lot, and I thank you for your time. And again, the webinar was recorded and the slides will be available on our website with the recording. Our next webinar is December 10th regarding farm to school and after school programs. We hope to see you all again in a month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.